I'm excited to have you on the podcast. One thing that I was curious about, you obviously have this background as being a successful attorney, scaling a practice, and now you've really pivoted into an author, and I see that you have a lot of best-selling books, both in the fiction and nonfiction. But I would love to ask you kind of a question about entrepreneurship and leadership. And when you look back at some of the decisions that mattered far more than you realized at the time, what would be something you could think of that, you looking back, you're like, that was a really big decision, you know, as a leader, as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a great question because I look back on my career. I started out as a lawyer, as you know, and you never are taught in law school how to be a business person. You're expected to go out, get your degree, and start practicing law. Hopefully, if you're lucky enough, you'll develop business. Well, that is not how it works. And I realized that early on. So I started to apply very simple, basic business principles to building my practice, SWOT analysis, things like that. Not rocket science, but just basic principles. And I found that they worked for me. So I kept to it. And I was very diligent in having written business plans every year, unlike most of the lawyers in my firm. And that gave me the ability to build a very large multimillion-dollar practice. But one of the things, if to get to your question, the thing about leadership that I think is the biggest lesson I had early on as a lawyer, because lawyers are generally jealous of their business and that kind of thing, and it's in their DNA, was to learn to trust delegation. And I found that the more I delegated, the more my work and business actually grew. And learning to trust those to whom you delegate to me is real leadership because that gives them the ability to learn their own way, to develop their own techniques or whatever it might be under your leadership and tutelage, and that you work as a team. And ultimately, that's what delegation accomplishes. It's a little scary at times because they're going to make mistakes and they're going to be problems. But without it, I don't think you're really a leader.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, kind of looking at my business, we have over 120 people now. And I remember having to make a really hard decision at a point where I made a decision I was not going to be an engineer anymore because that was my trade. That's basically how I built the business. But I had to like hand that off because I was going to be the stopping point that I wouldn't be able to scale the business more if I kept doing tasks that I was really good at. I'm curious, when something you said is like the delegation side, what was one of the hardest things you had to delegate? And how did you get over that fear, or you unblock your mind so that you could delegate it, even if the person maybe isn't as good as you?
You know, I learned that in a very surprising way. I had delegated a lot of my work for many years as I built my practice, first 15 or 20 years of my practice of building it. And then one day, I also trusted the people doing my delegating. I gave them the clients. I let them develop the clients. I was completely trustworthy and trusting them. Then one day, one of my key partners decided to leave the firm. And I was very fearful that she was going to take all of those clients to whom I had entrusted her. And I immediately called the clients on the phone and let them know she was leaving and asked them what their intentions were. And to a person, they all said they came to the party because of me and they'll stay. And that was a great lesson for me in terms of letting go of that risk factor and that fear of delegation. As long as you stay in touch with the people that are your clients, your customers, whatever, and you don't lose that touch because it's that personal touch that makes a difference. And I did it in very simple ways. I would send them handwritten notes occasionally during the year. I knew I wasn't doing their work; others were doing their work. But I would send them handwritten notes. I'd ask them how their kids are doing. It'd keep the personal side of it up. And to my surprise, when my fears that I thought I was going to face turned out to be quite the opposite, and it ended up being a great lesson.
Yeah, that's a great. I like that story. And it's a lesson I'm sure that made a big difference and helped you scale. Now something that's interesting about you is that you talk about, walking away from a successful career, successful business. Why did you do it? And then I'm also interested in why letting go is so difficult for so many people.
Well, it's a great question because, when I started out, I figured I'd be like most lawyers are, and they'll just, fall dead on their desk when they're 92 years old. And as I got older and my family was grown and my kids were out and my wife and I were just together and we moved to North Carolina, I got to thinking that, there's a whole lot more to life than the grind of being a lawyer. And I imagine that grind can be in any profession.
Yeah.
And I needed to find something that really got my passions going. And it wasn't the law anymore. That became more of a chore than a delight. But I did know that my passions really lied with writing novels and creative writing and doing that kind of thing. So I decided when I was 68 that I would start to transition the practice. And I did that over the course of 4 years. And so in 2022, by 2022, it was pretty much fully transitioned. And then over the next 2 years, I stayed with the firm and did some work but transitioned out completely into 2024, devoted 75% of my time at least to writing now. It was not easy at first because I was fearful I was giving up my identity. I mean, this is what I was. I was a lawyer and been doing it for nearly 50 years. Did I have the ability to do something differently and sustain myself emotionally during that change? So there were moments when I was very concerned about what have I done now, kind of thing. But over time, you take it slowly, one step at a time. I found it was relatively painless. I also approached it in the same way that I did when I built my business. When I decided to transition out, I naturally thought there were consultants who would tell me how to do this and all this other kind of stuff. But in reality, they were all people who were trying to sell me real estate, trying to sell me insurance or investment book portfolios or whatever. They weren't talking about the process. So I did it just like I did building it. I did a SWOT analysis of myself and built a plan out and a strategy out and the like. And so I charted the way through a plan rather than just sort of jumping off the cliff.
What was kind of, so when you're transitioning out of the business, how did you, were there things that you, if you were to do it over again, you would do differently? Like, how would you recommend a business owner transition out of their business? If they made that decision, they said, hey, I'm going to transition out. Is it better to find a buyer and say, hey, look, you buy this thing, I'm going to hand you the keys 2 months, 3 months from now, I'm out? Or it's going to be a year-long transition, 2-year-long transition? Like, talk to me about timeline that you think is good. And I know there's some individual things, but from your experience, and then like what are the pieces to that? Like if you wrote that out because you did that.
Well, first and foremost, I think you have to understand what it is you're selling. And that requires a very heartfelt, introspective analysis of what it is you have. And it's not just balance sheets and a list of assets and the like. It's the people, it's the product, it's the image, it's the goodwill, it's all these things that are in many ways the intangibles. And what are those intangibles? How much do you control those intangibles? How much do you control the business, et cetera? All those kinds of things. You've got to do a really deep dive analysis and reach out to others who might double check on your thinking, people you trust, so that you get a real good perspective of what it is you're trying to do. Then ask yourself a very difficult question of how important are you in the future transition? Usually you think you're, incredibly important because you built it. In fact, if you built it right, you have almost by definition eventually make yourself irrelevant. So that when you do go to decide to sell, as long as you've kept your team together and you've done the right kind of due diligence with that, you're going to find, I think, that the buyer or to whomever you're transitioning, it could be your employees, that it's going to be a much easier trip. In terms of timing, it's never too soon. It took me 5 years to fully transition my practice from the beginning of the idea to the, sort of the final day. It's a long time. It's a process, and you have to be true to it. That's probably the most difficult thing because along the way, people are going to disappoint you. People are going to surprise you. You're going to realize that those who you thought were on your side might not be, and those who you concerned about turned out to be really loyal people. So you've got to be able to adjust along the way as well. That's why you have to give yourself time. If you go into the transition period and say a year from now I want to leave, that's just not realistic, and that's not going to work. It's going to be a fire sale. But if you plan it out over a course of years, systematically, then I think you'll find that kind of a transition relatively easy.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Did you, when you transitioned out, did you sell to like another group of attorneys? Did you sell to your partners? Who did you, PE group, who was it that kind of took that
Interesting.
practice forward?
Interesting. You can't sell lawyers. You can't sell law firms.
Oh,
So
interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, learning.
for a profession that advises people on how to maximize the value of their businesses, they're terrible at doing it themselves. You don't buy and sell law firms. You don't buy and sell clients. So in effect, what a lawyer really does is cuts a deal with his current firm that I'm willing to transition these millions of dollars worth of business to these other people as long as you compensate me appropriately during this interim, and then we'll work out a deal. So you work out sort of a balance. It's not really a purchase or a buyout per se. It's kind of like a declining compensation over a course of time as you move work to others. But it's the screwiest model in the world. I mean, I never understood that lawyers of all people would not have a really established way of selling a practice, but they don't.
Yeah, that's funny. I think you should be able to sell it just like any other business, but I don't, obviously I'm not in the world. So I don't know. So
You can
let
in
me,
California. You could sell a law firm in California, so you're in the right place.
okay. Well, I should have been a lawyer, I guess. The question. So I want to ask you a little bit about your novel. Well, actually, one last question I have for you. If you were to go back in time, would you have exited sooner to become a writer? I mean, you were a writer the whole time, but to focus on writing, or would you have kind of done the same thing you did?
I would have left earlier. I say that because the fear factor of leaving. I mean, I was afraid to leave. I was making good money. Um, I was, in control of my day, but I wasn't having a lot of fun. But I refused to recognize that because of the fear factor. In hindsight, it's 100% accurate. In hindsight, I didn't have to have that fear, as it turned out. And I would have probably transitioned out 5 years earlier if I could have. I didn't gain much in that extra 5 years in terms of, much of anything that's meaningful. So I could have done it earlier and then devoted more time to what really was my passion. Because I started writing novels 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago. And they just occupied my thoughts more and more as the years went on. And I felt a lot of excitement when I came up with a good idea or whatever it might be. And I wasn't finding that in law. So if I could have done it over again, you had to have done it earlier.
Of your novels, which one was the most fun for you to write and why?
Who's your favorite child? I, I guess like the last one. It's an iterative process writing novels. You start out with an idea and you come up with characters and kind of exhaust them. You're going on to another character, another plot, another idea. But what I generally do is I write about what I observe is where I get my ideas.
Okay.
So this latest book is the third in a series about an FBI profiler who's hunting down serial killers. They're thrillers. My books. And in this particular book, the serial killer is AI. So I'm fascinated with AI in lots of different ways. So I decided I'd make a serial killer AI in this instance. And that's just, so that with all the insanity over AI right now and all the fears and benefits of AI right now, that was really enjoyable to write because I got to talk to a lot of experts in the area. I always talk to, I reach out to people when I write a novel who know a lot more about the subject matter than I do. So I got to meet a lot. I got to meet a lot of really interesting characters out there involved in the whole AI revolution, and learned a lot. So it was a lot of fun doing that.
Do you, thinking about the AI and the people you learned, what were, if there was something that was surprising that you learned in the process, what was that? Is there
I think,
anything that surprised you?
yeah, without doubt, the most surprising thing I learned was that when I talked to folks who were very high up in the AI architecture, that they were fearful. They were deeply concerned about where it was going and a lack of control, lack of regulation. As a lawyer, in my business, I didn't know a businessman who would welcome regulation by the government until I met these people in AI. So, it's interesting to meet pure entrepreneurs. These people are very much entrepreneurs who are basically saying, regulate me because I'm not sure whether I can control this thing that I'm building. That's scary. And that's very different than anything I've ever encountered.
Yeah, yeah. So our business is AI as well, and one thing that there's one area that I think would that could be use regulation because I don't know, I'm sure you've seen AI videos that they make. They'll take a celebrity or they can do it with the president or whatever, and they can have them doing like really funny stuff, and it is entertaining, but at the same time, the idea that someone can take your likeness, and it literally almost looks like it's almost indistinguishable at this point, and it's going to get more and more, like a deep fake, make you do things. Um, One that starts to make people question like real footage in crimes and things like that. But then the other thing about it is like, yes, it is to a certain degree. There always through history there was cartoons and things of famous people, and it's funny. But like when it's indistinguishable or almost indistinguishable, if someone were to do that to my likeness and make me do and say things, whether it's funny or, people are going to perceive me a certain way just based on the videos, even if they know that they're not real. They're like, I've seen you do this, just the way it works with the brain. You're going to start viewing that person that way. And I think there should be a certain amount of regulation on taking someone's likeness to that extent, because it's not satire anymore. It goes beyond that, and I feel that could be damaging to individuals. And I don't know. It's just something I see. I'm like, I'm really surprised that there's no regulation. And another thing I really do hate on social media is constant AI videos, and I have to like determine if it's real or not. I really wish that I could go onto my social media and there was like a label that this is the AI, and if I could don't want to see AI videos, I have the option not to see it because honestly, I don't want to go on. I want to see a funny video or a cool video of an animal, not an AI video that made me think it was cool to get the clicks. Like I'm kind of sick of that kind of stuff myself.
You bring up a very interesting idea. If they could create a filter that you could say, don't show me AI videos, that'd be terrific if they could do that.
Yeah, I
You
really
very
would.
well. Sort of a broader issue. The use of your likeness is, under this broad umbrella of intellectual property. And for AI to work, as you know, it's large language models. They have to absorb incredible amounts of data and information. The more, the better they're going to allegedly be. So that means they're using a lot of stuff out there and absorbing a lot of the literature and data and et cetera that is protected intellectually by intellectual property, copyright, trademark, you name it. Recently, Anthropic, who you know is a big AI purveyor out there, settled a case against novelists, where the novelists had sued Anthropic and some of the publishers and novelists in the class action, sued them for using their intellectual property, their books and their publications without permission to, populate their databases. And they settled for something like $180 billion or some incredible amount of money that when I first saw that settlement, I said, "Oh my God, that's an incredible amount of money." Then I looked at their capitalization and the revenues that they're anticipating to generate, and that was just basically, it wasn't rounding off error, but it was hardly enough to put them anywhere near out of business. So you're right. There needs to be something done about. I mean, you got a conflict here between if philosophically we're not going to stop AI from developing and continuing to grow. That's just that the cat's out of the bag. We can't do that. At the same time, we have to make sure that they don't abuse the rights of intellectual property that others have developed, whether it's their likeness, their songs, their books, their whatever it is that you created, and it's still protected. They shouldn't be able to have carte blanche ability to just take that, put it into their databases, so that they can then regurgitate that. So there's a lot of things going on in that area right now. There's an interesting law that just recently passed in New York, where if of all things a television commercial, right? If you use AI in a television commercial, they're saying you need to put a super on there that was AI. So whether that's going to make someone not buy the product or not, I don't know. But there are things going on now where people are looking at the regulation, but it's very slow, and the speed, as you know, of AI developing is so fast that you, you have a concern whether regulation can come along fast enough.
Yeah, I could see that. I predict, and I know Hollywood's worried about it, big time, but I really do predict that you see these creators that are making these AI movies, and they're getting better and better. And I imagine it won't be long till there's a software where I could just go in there and I say, write me this type of movie, make me this movie, or I like this book, turn it into a movie, but I want it to be, this level of rating, and I want this and I want that, and I want it this long. And a few hours later it'll pump out a movie with fully fleshed that you could just push play and watch it. Like I think that's not too far away, and it's gonna drastically change how people create and consume content. I think that that's a real thing, and I'm sure the writers are probably thinking the same thing, because you're writing books. If someone can you know just have access to all your books, and they say, hey, make me part two of this novel, do the same style, build it out, and they write a book for you using your content, essentially, um, you might have something to say about that.
It's almost like I mean, as a writer, that's my biggest concern. It takes me a year to write a book. And it's a hard process because I painstakingly research it. I do all the things that, writers do. To think that some machine can do the same thing in a matter of minutes is frightening to me. And I wonder what that means for future writers, who won't necessarily go through the process that most writers we know today go through in order to finish a book. It's a long, arduous journey. If they could just turn there and flip the switch and get a book, well, then what publisher is going to bother to hire a writer? They'll just use AI. They'll take some theme or whatever it might be, throw it in there, and then spit out a book, spit out a screenplay, whatever it is. And you're right that the next phase will be where they don't even have to bother with going to a studio. They'll then say, okay, make the movie. And it'll use all AI generated CGI and the rest of it. And it'll create characters and visualizations and all the rest of that. That's in the offing. I mean, that's not speculation. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
How fast, I don't know. But sooner or later it is. So then what happens to the creative minds out there? Folks like you, folks like me who want to be creative and create things and write things and entertain people. What happens to us? We're no longer really that important or that necessary. So
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound like I'm, well, Chicken Little screaming the sky is falling, but nobody seems to be doing anything to regulate that. And if you don't regulate it, then it's guaranteed to happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. The other thing that's interesting is you know, AI as it currently stands, once it starts it's really good when it gets content from humans, but it seems to get worse and worse the more AI content it consumes and then builds off the AI content. So instead of like you know, you can see that like if you do an experiment with art. So you can tell it to the AI to make you art, and it will make art based off of styles and paintings that humans have done. But now if it has to learn off of the art that AI has created, and then it just keeps doing it, it just starts turning into blobs. Like it doesn't get better, it like degrades. And so I also feel that there's like a degradation that will happen both in people's creative abilities, thinking abilities, overly relying on AI. I already rely, you know, in my business, I use AI constantly. And I have to be honest when I say the more I use it, the less hard I have to think, right? It's, you know, it'll rewrite an email for me. So now I don't have to be as accurate on my grammar and thinking about, hey, how is this thought going to come across, because AI can just do it for me. And you know, it's lowering my the muscles in my brain to critically think or to write. And I think the same thing will happen to, you know, creative minds as well. I think there'll always be people that push the envelope, but at the same time there's going to be, for the larger population, less creative thinking, and I don't see how that's a good thing.
Years ago, I viewed a video that was allegedly leaked from Google called "The Selfish Gene." You can go on the internet and find it if you want to. And what it talked about. This is 8 years ago. What it talked about was the ability, in a positive way, in their mind, the ability that social media and that interaction could help people's lives, could improve this, could improve that, whatever. And I got to thinking, well, yeah, if it's so influential and it can so invade your brain to make you think different ways, well, what's the bad side of that? So, and that was what precipitated a novel I wrote called Dark Data, which was a novel about terrorism using social media to, as a weapon of mass destruction. I won't go into the details, but it is, you're right about how it changes your mind. And now we fast forward to AI, and it's so simple to let it do what it does to make your day a little more efficient. And I don't deny that it does that, but you hit the main point. That what does that mean long term? What does that mean about our innate ability to be creative thinkers? What strikes me about AI is that when you put something into it and you're asking it to be creative, as it were, the way it works is it just takes all the data it has and it goes to the next iterative step that would logically occur based on what it has. So if you say, I want you to write something about X, it will write it based on what it has in its database, but it won't really have a spark of a new idea. It won't depart. You know, if Thomas Edison had gone into AI and said, help me invent a light bulb, AI couldn't do it in my mind, because for him to be able to do that, he had to have something inspirational that happened in his human brain that leapt the leapt the Rubicon and found the place where he needed to be. I don't, people tout about how AI is going to create all these wonderful things, but I don't know about that. I mean, because I think that the great inventions that we have out there and the great advancements we've made, whether it's people like Edison and Einstein and Steve Jobs and people like that, they don't come from a machine. I hope. But yet people seem to think it will. So they start to rely on it more and more. And what I'm fearful of is that the real creative sparks out there that make a change to mankind, I don't want to get overly philosophical, are going to be thwarted and eventually go away.
I I would agree with that. I think that AI hasn't produced any kind of meaningful experiment, sorry, let me take that back. Not experiment, any meaningful invention uh, that like a human has. And you would think, with as fast as it learns all the information it has, that it should have been able to actually invent some things by now. But it only cross-referenced. I've heard that it's helped in the medical field, but that's because it's cross-referencing a lot of different data and bringing it together, which would take, hours or years for a human to do. But it's not actually inventing, like you said, a light bulb, right? It's not inventing a hydrogen based car or things of that nature. So I do agree with you. That comes from human ingenuity and more than just data that can be curated and pulled together quickly.
I'll give you a little story about AI and my interaction with it. I'm an author, so kind of lark. I decided I was going to tell AI that I ran a book club and that I wanted to give me a study piece that I can give to my book club about one of my novels that would give provocative questions about the novel, etc. So I said, okay, do it for this particular book. And I had not yet published that book. It was just about to be published. So it was not in the public domain. It wasn't out there yet. Within seconds, it spit out a whole outline of a book of that would be this book that had not yet been published. It invented it. It invented all of it because it couldn't say, I can't do this. I can't find the book. It's not capable of doing that. So it invented it. So then I wrote back, as if I'm talking to a human. I wrote back, you jerk. This is a book I haven't even published yet. Where do you get off giving me this review? And, it writes back always politely. Oh, yes, I forgot. I didn't, I should have done a proper, and it just gives itself excuses. It's hilarious at times how it's programmed to just be an idiot and give you whatever you ask it to give you, whether it exists or not. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's really, yeah, interesting. Well, what is kind of you see as the future of AI from your experience? Where do you see it being in 5 years from now?
But where I hope it will be is that our distrust, we will have a much greater distrust for it. So we will keep it more as a tool than a substitute for thinking, a tool to help us think, to help us be more efficient. I think it's got incredible promise for that. So I hope in 5 years from now, it'll be a very robust tool that'll help people who need to move from A to B, do it more efficiently, whether it's in medicine or law or creative or whatever, but as a tool only, not as a substitute for the human factor. So that's what I hope is. Where it's gonna be, I have no idea. I couldn't even venture a guess on where it'll be, but I can certainly hope that it will still be here and using it as a tool as opposed to using us as a tool.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Good. So, what is the next? What is the book you just released? The last one, or the one you're working on that you just mentioned? Is that
Well,
available? Is it ready to be purchased?
yeah, the one I just released is called Deadly Bites, BYTES, and that's third in the series of the FBI profiler that I write about. And it came out in May. It just came out in May, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookstores now and again. I mean, it depends on bookstores are weird, but it's available online. It's an Amazon bestseller, so I'm very happy about that. And it's a story about, again, an FBI profiler who's hunting down an AI serial killer. And I joke with people saying, beware, if you read my book, you'll never drive a Tesla again. So, so anyway, that's sort of the warning that I should have put on the book.
I love it. I love it. Oh, thank you. And where can people find you if they want to see more of this book and your other books? And I know that you also speak quite a bit. So where can people find you and learn more about what you're doing?
Well, in terms of my writing, my novels and stuff, it's all at my author's website at douglasjwood.com. Very easy to find. And that has all the novels I've written, all my books, and all that kind of good stuff. The for the business side of what I do, and the transition, the the counseling on business development and the like. That's at my website, from dawn, the number two dusk, FROMDAWN, the number two dusk.com, from dawn to dusk.com. Because that's the title of a book I wrote that I may have mentioned. The last nonfiction book I wrote was From Dawn to Dusk: How to Build a Multi-Million-Dollar Practice and then give it away. So that's the business side of it. So depending on what your viewers and listeners are interested in, if they're interested in thrillers, go to douglasjwood.com. If they're interested on the business side, go to fromdawntodusk.com.
I love it. Well, thank you. I appreciate you being on, Douglas. I really enjoyed the conversation. It was great, and you had a lot of insights that were new to me, and I enjoyed learning about them.
Well, it's great having you, and thank you very much for having me on. As you can see, I enjoy talking about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's stay in contact, and I appreciate you, and yeah, I think that's a wrap.
Okay, great. Good. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
All righty.